welcome to our guest jurors. Today we have three people coming from the outside. We have Ed Wall, who is the director of the Master in Landscape Architecture in University of Greenwich. We have Liam Moritz, who is an ex-LUer. Currently, I think you are based now in China, are you, Liam?
No, I'm in Australia, in Perth.
In Perth.
I was in China for a while. But yeah,
so in China, you're in Perth. It's true. I always see the fan try to cool you down there from WA hot weather. And also, Liam will be joining us in the next term for tutorials as part of LU staff in substitution for Clara, that she will be taking maternity leave for a number of months. And then we also have Chris Williams from the New Economics Foundation. He is an expert on aquaculture, has been part of the course in the past, and will be able to give some input into today's presentation. Today's will be seen. Give me just 1 second. Sorry, I'm in homeschooling. It's a bit of a nightmare. The kids have just finished their classes. They are super bored. It's a little bit of a nightmare, really. And I have two teams meetings. Just give me 1 second.
Teresa, it's nice to see you.
Hi.
And also, we do have Teresa Stopani from within the course, as we've just seen, who teaches this term a seminar on rhetorics of mapping to the current students. We do have all of our students as well seeing the presentation. Today we'll see the only MArch student, Nandita, who will be presenting her final thesis work on paludiculture in the application of new forms of agriculture, in particular attention to paludiculture in the UK as part of a new Green New Deal series of years that we are currently working on LU. So she will be explaining the work that she has carried on her own over the last months. She was working with Rani, another student, for a number of months in the previous year, and she carried on in the last term on her own bit of dissertation. And today is the last bits, the last presentation she has, and I think she's submitting these days her final, basically, booklet or portfolio. So without further ado, Nandita, I see you are there. Yeah, you can actually show yourself, say hello, and we will go to the presentation. We'll have, I guess, half an hour or how many minutes later of comments. But I had mentioned before, there's only one student doing MArch. If you don't see me, it's because I'm trying to chase those guys, and I say apologies again. Ideally, it would be Alfredo more dealing with this while I take care of the kids. Tuesdays is my days with him, so it's been a bit unfortunate. But obviously, it's for a good reason that he's not here, and he obviously sends his regards to you. So Nandita, without further ado, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello everybody, my name is Nandita. I'm doing my MArch final with Landscape Urbanism under Eduardo, Clara and Alfredo. And I'm honored to have such an amazing jury today. And without further ado, I'll start my presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes, all good.
Yeah.
Thank you. So my thesis is about the need of transition from a system of cultivating a field to a system that cultivates soil by using ecosystem patterns so we can conserve and produce at the same time. I will attempt to do this by addressing the following. Soil at finite source has been subjected to degradation due to agriculture, with warnings given by the UN that UK has only 30 to 40 years left of soil fertility. 13 million hectares of plants and trees which help in combating soil erosion is cut down every year to make room for agriculture. Around the world, we see soils as carbon stores in the form of peatlands, as seen here in the black, and carbon content in the gradient of brown. Peatlands score 0.37 gigatons and more of carbon in them. That's more than the combined amount stored in the vegetation and atmosphere of the earth. These peatlands, due to their soils rich in carbon content, work as exceptional productive grounds. Inadequate agriculture practices, as depicted by the green, have led to carbon release from the soils, leading to an imbalance in the atmosphere. We see a good amount of carbon stored in these peatland stocks in the UK by constant waterlogging, marsh formation, creation of swamps. But peat drainage for agriculture, as well as various uses for, has led to heavy carbon release. The drainage has also led to flooding related to issues as the same areas have now gone below sea level. East Anglia, also known as the breadbasket of the UK, has an array of farming activities on these peatlands, leading to intense carbon release. Agriculture, comprising only 7% of the peatlands, emits 40% of the carbon emission in the peatlands. In this map, we can see how the existing and wasted peats in the gradation of brown, and with the different production techniques surrounding the East Anglian landscape, which are intense farms, environmentally friendly farms, permaculture farms, and paradiculture farms. Inadequate practices like monocropping, intensive industrial farms has led to creating a model for production that is isolated and therefore depends on external inputs. Soil culture practices like permaculture work towards using ecosystem patterns to its advantage by creating zones and creating a permanent exchange of energy through connecting each element. Therefore, by enhancing soil culture, it creates a better system of support, regulation, provision, and cultural ground. Where did we lose the sense of ecosystem while managing our landscapes? We've seen a gradual increase in the UK's parcel size. This was done to make room for the host of mechanics assisting the modern farmer. Going through the historical period, we see two big turning points in the relationship between humans and their productive grounds. With the advent of industrialization, Domestic Allotment Act and Domestic Allotment Act, small farmers were forced to leave their lands for industrial labor. This is also referred to as divorce from nature. The increase in population also led to catering for domestic system to an industrial one, with agricultural land taking over UK's woodlands and fenlands. Agricultural machinery was upgraded to inversion tilling, and fields were turned to soil to turn the soil, and this led to decrease in soil fertility, which was then catered to by changing the crop rotation system to use of fertilizers. After the VE Day and creation of the EU framework for agriculture was developed under CAP, and DEFRA was formed. Through all these changes, we see a divorce of society and nature as agriculture land increased, but we see a drastic decrease in the number of farmers. How has the UK landscapes been managed under CAP? Agriculture has been managed under the European Union under CAP. The CAP works around two pillars. Pillar 1, which is direct payment scheme, and pillar 2, which is rural development scheme. The funding to relieve food insecurity was done according to production potential. The bigger the farm, the bigger the subsidy. With the introduction of the new agriculture bill, we will see some transformation, like the power to be granted to local authorities, provide subsidies to farmers in a more just manner to promote sustainable practices. Secondly, public money for public goods is introduced to help farmers sustain the ecosystem services that belong to the public, like soil, water, plant life, etc. What's the new agriculture bill is lacking is a stronger role of agriculture in climate change. Structure of subsidies lead to 3/4 of the funding being ported by 1/4 of the producers, and just 10% coming into pockets of small producers. Different agencies work under DEFRA, such as non-ministerial departments, executive agencies, non-department and departmental public bodies. all funded by the government. The parity in expenditure and funding is visible here. Learning from the model developed under the New Deal to combat dust bowls of 20th century in the US, we will find that soil conservation department for management of our soils is needed for us to truly be carbon free. Soil management practices can be revisualized with soil at the heart of public goods, catering to farmers with various departmental support for land tenure, community governance, tools and technologies, and finance and economics, as well as to realize the need of interconnections to come up with support which can be monetary, knowledge-based, or decision-making. How does the soil culture help mitigate these issues? Let's study this natural soil ecosystem. Gills are formed by a system of elements made up of plant, soil, animals, and insect community, working as traders, messengers, distributors, and interactors. Permaculture is based on the principles of using these natural ecosystems for an intrinsic system of each element supporting another, and zoning systems to create models of production and conservation. It's based on a low external input and high productivity. Let's study this diagram for a better understanding. Each element can be seen as a system that requires some input and generates an output. We will now try to discover these connections in a permaculture farm. Here we see a bigger picture exchange of energy within a system. We also see how a permaculture system can mimic natural barriers to create microclimates. We also see how certain areas can be used as systems of learning succession to conserve environment as well as produce. We can visualize how we can create water catchment and wetland conditions, as well as production can be done through wetland farming, and these zones will play an important role in restoring landscape and habitats, as we will see later. We see how different outputs and inputs are assessed for different agricultural techniques, and find out that permaculture doesn't just increase productivity, decrease in inputs, but also support a host of ecosystem services. And for East Anglian landscape, we also realize the emission due to wetland farming techniques listed under permaculture, like paladiculture, is the lowest and would be the best technique to be used for the Broads. How are the UK's carbon stores affected by agriculture, and how can we make the transition? In the historical maps, we can see the evolution of Norfolk Broads from a three-river system to getting flooded because of the increase in sea level, and we see how the environment has changed over the years to show a layering of peat and sandbed, as well as we see how open marshes were changed into intensive systems. We can also see different stages of wetland plantation in the Norfolk Broads, and will identify the endangered species and animals around these sites. Let's see how policies can help aid the transition using agriculture. The phasing out process from direct payment schemes will be carried out in the period of 7 years by gradual decrease in direct payments and money to be poured in an environmental land management scheme, delivering public goods for public money. This is within the ELM's 25-year transformation plan. This will be manifested by allowing farmers and landowners to continue with their stewardship grants, be it environmental or countryside, if they're already up to mark, and also by creating more opportunities for such grants in the fourth phase. A national pilot with 5,500 farmers will be conducted for assessment of final policies to be laid down in 2028. The environmental land management scheme simplifies the rural development approach to three elements: sustainable, local nature recovery, landscape recovery, which covers soil health, habitat restoration, peatland restoration, etc. Analyzing the management systems that are in play in the Broads landscape, we can see how the farms around the Broads and the peatlands that use government subsidies under environmental stewardship fall around some of the special status sites that are internationally registered as sites of conservation and learning. We will study pasture farms that fall under the county farms of Norfolk, which is highlighted here. Norfolk County farms are managed under County Council. Here we see how some of the management pockets of the council. Financially, the council spends most of the money on providing frontline services and education services. Due to parity in the government funding and expenses, we see the public farms have decreased drastically in the last century. To help farmers transition, I've created a manual which I'll go through right now. We can see how farmers will be familiarized with the energy recycling and sustainable farming systems. We'll also familiarize farmers with the elements of permaculture. Create an assessment plan for the farmers by showing how to create energy management sectors and on the site for a layout. Also create zones, how to lay out zones and what elements you can use. This will also give the farmers a variety of permutation and combinations to create their permaculture farm. We'll also look at soil and how to create soil sampling data, and also how to analyze soil test. Also create a plantation guide for the farmers to help them realize the sowing season and yielding seasons of some crops that can help them, and also give a guide about how to create wetland conditions in their sites, and also the use of cattail and reed and alder in a fashion where when water is poured into the cattail field, which then carry forwards the nutrients to the reed and alder. Now we will zoom into the Motby estate here. Here you can see the simulation of flooding simulation, and we see how the riverbed gets completely flooded in winters. We can also see how this estate is surrounded by croplands. And we see how monoculture is practiced in this estate. And we also see these two woodlands, which can also act as stepping stones in ecosystem and habitats. Now zooming into the Paston farm in this Motby estate, we will try to mimic the permaculture model here. Here we can see as a guide that we can use ecological succession as a permaculture guide to create zones. Here we see how this farm is doing monocropping, and assessing that similar to the ecological succession, we create zones, and also looking at soil and soil reconditioning, we realize that zone 1 needs more bacterial inputs, whereas zone as you move to zone 5, it needs more fungal input. Here we see how this can be revisualized as a permaculture farm with different zones and the section laid out here. We can also see a transition by looking at the present agricultural practices of tilling and land and intense use of fertilizer to be developed into a there's an intense use of pesticides, and that how it hampers soil health and air quality. But whereas if we transform into this area into wetland farming, how we can gain productivity, air quality, water quality, as well as soil health. I've also mentioned how the transformation and the costing related to this, which can be covered by the 7 years phase that we spoke about earlier. We can also see how a flooding simulation for this area and see how creating wetland conditions and ditches we can stop the flooding. We can also see how zone 1 and 2 of permaculture can be realized in different phases over the years. Here we see an example of sphagnum farming in the wetland, and see how in the 6 years we can create a production system that is stabilized, as well as gain enough carbon sequestration. Plus, we can see how we can move away from subsidies-based agriculture farming, as the production, as break-even prices for the floriculture products like reed, alder, cattail, sphagnum can be, once established, can be easily managed. Here we see the Modby estate again, and how these two woodlots can be connected using the zone 5 of permaculture, which you can see here. Now looking at the large-scale strategy, I've analyzed the stepping zones according to the Lawson report, which are grasslands, woodlots, reed beds, and reed beds. We can transform this area into a permaculture zone and see how different zones are mentioned here, and zone 5 can be used as a biodiversity corridor between the special sites that were mentioned before. Not just in this area, but we can revisualize this for the entirety of East Anglia, and see how grassland, wetland, and woodland corridors can be overlapped, and we can create these systems of wildlife corridors using agriculture and permaculture. There is an intense potential in the sites all around the UK, with peatlands degrading and creating an imbalance of carbon. To another way to check soil conservation, I've created a system of analyzing virtual export of soil. So before Brexit, UK was trading a lot with Europe, but post Brexit, UK has plans to trade with countries like New Zealand, China, USA, and basically we created a system of how we can assess how much soil carbon is used as per what product, and basically have created which trade makes us lose how much carbon content, and this can help basically create a virtual soil exchange expenditure, and can help countries to cut down these by implementing sustainable practices like permaculture. If we go back to the scale, we see how if we keep agricultural practices around these soils, such as peatlands, we're going to lose all of the carbon that has been stored in these peatlands. But if we take a different approach by taking care of the special status sites or internationally, with the use of agriculture, we can stabilize the peatland restoration, create habitats, and also produce at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandita, for a quite good presentation, and I wouldn't say pretty much on time, but almost on time. I think it's very well prepared. And without further ado, I think we can open the door to our jurors to see if there's any comments.
Maybe I could kick off, Eduardo and Nandita,
Sure.
if that's okay. I very much enjoyed the presentation, Nandita. Thank you. It's great to see this intensity of research, and I think what the MARC, so the length of the MARC brings is this opportunity to really get so deeply knowledgeable about a subject area. I have a question, if I could start with a question, which is really about, you mentioned partway through the benefits that some larger, let's say, farmers receive traditionally through the CAP process. And I was wondering if you could talk to, let's say, the changes in scale, or the way that you've tried to address some of these issues of scale within your proposal.
Mm-hmm. Can you repeat? Sorry,
So I'm interested in let's say how your proposal tries to, let's say, address issues of scale, whether that's the scale of farming sort of operation, whether it's the scale of fields, whether it's the even dimensions of time within sort of within your proposal, because it's from my understanding, it's sort of some of the evolutions with agriculture and the depletion of soils often relates to this industrialization of agriculture and the sort of the larger field sizes and the larger farms and the bigger grants that are given to these larger farmers. And I was wondering, maybe if you could just go into a bit of detail about how your proposal addresses some of these dimensions.
Basically, the proposal talks about transforming, no matter what scale your farm is, transforming your farm into a permaculture farm, which basically has different zones which cater to different intensity of production. And permaculture is also known to be producing exactly the same amount, if not less, than these industrial farms, as well as helping in sustainable agriculture. So if you're talking about scale and implementation of such activities, then I would like to go back to the phasing out that the UK is going through right now with the Brexit, which is like a 7-year period where farmers will phase out from the direct payment schemes, which were basically based on the farm size. So these farmers were definitely getting benefited by the industrial farmers, and the big farms were definitely getting a lot of support because of the CAP's subsidy system. And now that we're phasing out from there and we're changing into a new system where we're just looking at environmental land management, and all the subsidies will go through environmental land management. So I think in that sense, the 7-year period, which basically talks about how you can apply for more and more country stewardships and environmental stewardships, because they'll be given this opportunity in this 7-year period, and then continue that into environmental land management schemes. So basically, this 7-year period can be like for industrial farms as well. A period where they can look at their farming practices and see where is the potential of change, and they can start the transformation so they can easily transition in the 7-year period.
Okay, thank you. So you're seeing it's very similar to the larger industrial farms to the smaller farms.
Yeah, because so first of all, the small farms are doing well without getting the amount of subsidies that would help them because of the size of the farms. So it's literally no matter the size of the farm, It's literally about transitioning through this sort of practice that, like I mentioned, like which is permaculture, which is very idealistic, but you can do step by step and look at different schemes which are under country side stewardships and environmental stewardships, and see the opportunity and potential in your farm and start the transition.
Thank you very much, Nandita.
Thank you.
Eduardo, do you mind if I go next, please? Because I need to leave at 11:45.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, yeah, sure.
Great, thanks very much. So just you introduced me as an expert in aquaculture, but I've actually spent the last year working on agricultural projects. One of them is about how to finance the transition to agroecology, which shares a lot of features with permaculture, and the other project is on reimagining county farms, which is the public farmland that Nandita spoke about. So I'm extremely happy to have heard your presentation, Nandita. I think you did a really fantastic job. You've obviously really immersed yourself in the subject, and I thought that the visual side of your sort of presentation and analysis was really striking and really well done. And we all recognize it's pretty difficult doing these kind of presentations online compared to presenting it to a room of people where you can get the normal kind of social cues as to how you were doing. So I just wanted to congratulate you, first of all, on the presentation you've given. I think you've clearly put a lot of time and thought into it, and you understand the policy context. I think what's really interesting about your work is that you've focused on the sort of financial viability at the same time as the soil health and at the same time as issues around water. I think that that's a really important component, and it's quite easy to think that the agricultural transition will only happen at the sort of small farm scale, which is obviously going to be easier because these small scale farmers are much more likely to use permaculture or agroecological techniques. But what I liked about your presentation is that it also focused on the transition that will matter most, which is how to get the big industrial farms that are currently paid basically subsidies for pretty much just owning land, and how to shift that into the ELMS regime, because obviously the impact of changing the big industrial monoculture is going to be much bigger than that sort of marginal change for some of those small farms. I think it's been, I mean, you've clearly spent many months going through the policy context and also looking at the kind of available data, whether that's about soil health and how farmers can actually measure and improve it, or whether it's about nature conservation areas, or indeed about public farmland. And I think that you've done a really good job, and you've thought it through very well, and I'm keen to hear what you plan to do with this work next, because we're actually in two pieces of the work that I'm currently doing. There will be a component on kind of campaigns and on going to local authorities and showing how they could use their public land to be a kind of prototype or a model for that agricultural transition, which will be much harder and slower to do for the industrial farms. It will have to be done through nudges and incentives and through shifting the subsidy regime. But what we can do with public land, we can start doing tomorrow. And I think your focus on Norfolk was very interesting, because that's actually one of the local authorities that we decided to focus on as well. So aside from your great presentation, it'd be really interesting to think about how some of the work you've done can actually also be used in a campaign to actually start trying to impact change on the ground. So I'm happy to continue that conversation afterwards, but well done.
Thank you so much. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking to do next, is to compile the information and basically create 3 templates, one for the farmers, one for the landowners, and a third one for the local authorities, and how they can basically help with the transition. So that's what I'm working for my final report. Thank you.
Hey Nandita. Thanks for your presentation. It's really good stuff, and must be a big challenge as well to have to put it all together on your own. I've got a couple of questions. Yeah, I guess in contrast to Chris, all this stuff is like super new to me. So I think some of the aspects I found a little bit difficult to follow, but I think the sort of graphics and drawings and visualizations and everything in the way that you considered it through time is a really powerful way of showing it. I guess one of the things I was thinking about is when you're doing these kinds of presentations, what are the different kinds of audiences that you might be able to present the work to, and how you might be able to almost shape the conversation and shape the graphics and everything along with it, so that it can, I don't know, be readily understandable by different levels of expertise. Like one of the sections of your presentation that I thought was really interesting, to me at least, was the idea of creating like a manual that you could almost give to farmers that sort of explains what the process is and how they might be able to implement it over time. And this could be something that, you know, maybe is considered as a sort of a part of the sort of document that you could take forward and take to the local community and start to workshop with that. And so I was wondering as well, in terms of all the research that you did, what was the kind of feeling amongst the local community, or what's the local opinion in that particular county area about this approach to farming? Is there some big opposition, I guess, from some people, a lot of people into it, or what's the kind of conflict going on there, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I've not had that much local contact because of COVID, but I did have a few one conversation with an agriculture professional who helped me sort through my questions about similar questions as well. So definitely looking at this kind of approach where we talk about complete transition to a new kind of practice is very ideal in the minds of like farmers, and how you spoke about how locally, if I go to them and I tell them, okay, this is the kind of transition that we need to do, it's very difficult to achieve that 100%. So the response was basically to create opportunities or potentials within a farm, where a farmer can continue doing what he's doing because he feels secure doing that, but also sort of invest into something small at first, see the results, and continue that practice till you reach what you're planning to do. So that was basically what advice I was given. And secondly, what was a little peculiar to me about was that like industrial farmers, like they are dependent on subsidies, but they not as much, which I was a little this thing about, and because they make enough with their farm estates already, and some resilience found there with the new agriculture bill trying to make the transition through the subsidies. And what else? I think these were the few points that I came across when looking at how this would be practically on ground dealt with the people who are farming and who are landowners.
And are there people there that are doing some of these techniques already?
Definitely, there are. So as I showed you in the first phase, in this area, there are 2 permaculture farms and 1 polyculture farm already. So, and these practices are, they have been working well. It's just that farmers have, like, whoever landowners are there, they have the land. It's kind of like it's been in the family. They know the techniques that they've been doing for ages now. So it's very difficult to go to them and tell them that, okay, this is the way forward, because they're somewhat set in their ways as well. But there are a lot of farmers that they understand the role of soil and are whatever capacity are working towards doing better soil practices, at least like less tillage and precision fertilizers. So there is kind of a response where these young farmers, that's why I concentrated on county farms, because county farms can basically create a platform for new farmers to come in, maybe new technology, new ways of farming to come in. So that's why I looked at county farms as well.
And sort of along these lines, if you as a next step took it to the local county, the local council, is this something that they would be like enthusiastic about trying to work with people together, or would they sort of be like, is there a lot of opposition to this kind of thing? I'm trying to get a sense of, I don't know, if I went to propose some farming strategy as some city slicker here, and I don't know really anything about farming, but they'd sort of laugh you out of the room. And the reality is that there's been people that are all different experts, and there's lots of different opinions and debates and so on.
There are a number of stakeholders in this area that would make matters a little complicated, but the major picture, which is right now, is the 25-year plan or 2050, the Green New Deal, and all these things that are going around, and people are looking at strategies to reach that goal. And definitely, I think whoever I've spoken to have told me that people are interested in this sort of an approach, and are looking for if to give you an example, the county farms, which are the public farms, one of the criteria of choosing a farmer to use the county farm is what kind of practice they are bringing in to the table. So basically, and that is managed under the county council. So if you're talking about the council and the local authorities, how they would look at this, they would definitely consider transitioning to sustainable practices.
I think Chris had his hand raised.
Very quickly, and then I have to leave. That was a really good question by Liam, and I think what we're finding in our project is that the real problem is, after 12 years of austerity, local authorities are in a really bad financial state, and they need to think about housing, adult social care, schools, and in all of these conflicting priorities. If they're sitting on a farmland asset worth £10 million, we're finding that local authorities have just been selling off that asset for that, to plug that short-term gap. But then obviously they're in a situation where in 2 years' time they're out of cash again, and they then don't have that asset and aren't in a position to try and generate good rural livelihoods or meet their climate change commitments or the climate emergency through that land. So what we've been working on is trying to actually halt the sort of sale of public land, and that there needs to be a kind of either a community right to buy or some kind of system whereby local authorities can't put the sort of financial incentive of selling the land ahead of anything else and any other use for that land, because it's only a short-term fix. And obviously the loss of public land weakens all of us in our ability to deal with the biodiversity and climate crisis. So yeah, it's an ongoing problem, but then it's been a long time in the making. I have to leave now, but thanks ever so much for including me, and happy to continue the conversation.
Fantastic, Chris. Thanks very much for your input.
Eduardo, could I ask a question of you? In how long Nandita still has?
Sure. How long does she have to wrap up?
How many weeks or days, Nandita, do you have?
I think it should be 1 week or so.
No, I have two weeks.
2 weeks?
2.5, 30th of January till 30th of January. Yeah.
Okay. I think the only thing I maybe, if you have a couple of weeks still to go, Nandita, I just want to maybe make a small suggestion in sort of making more visible some of your propositions, because I think actually you tell a very good story through the project. But for me, coming to the project relatively with little knowledge, it's difficult within the project to see what your proposals were. And it's not about saying, you know, what is your role as an architect, because this is not what the program's about. And I think it's a very old question, but I think it's maybe more about what are the spatial proposals and the spatial changes that are coming from your combined knowledge of agriculture, architecture, urbanism, landscape. Because then this for me is what makes the program exciting. But I think when the move from the MSc to the MArch, I think also gives a tilt towards not just the research, but also making clear the proposal. So I think for me, there's a little bit of confusion at times what it was exactly within the slides that you're proposing. So I would very much like to see over the next couple of weeks a bit more emphasis on that.
Definitely. Thank you for your advice.
I think personally, there's a quite an interesting debate that is opened by this type of research and work on actually what is the role of the farmer and who actually owns what. Like, the idea is that to a certain extent there's a depth of soil that, because of its capacity to increase biodiversity, because of its capacity to hold CO2, is actually a public good. So in other words, the farmer cannot do whatever he wants with that 30 centimeters of soil. It's everybody's. You cannot just dump it. You cannot just damage it. He has an obligation to take care of it because it's somebody else's. And I think one of the things that we've discussed many times in the course is that this happens in other disciplines, like contractors in building sites in the UK cannot simply dispose of the soil and treat it badly, in that you are obliged to comply with certain aspects of sedimentation and control plan. They cannot just simply let the runoff take away the soil just because it's theirs. No, they have an obligation towards keeping it in place. So you could actually extend that to the 30 centimeters of depth, saying actually those worms are not yours. They are a public good somehow. And that's a sort of like implicit discussion on ownership of what is it that you're actually owning. And the answer would be, okay, you own the capacity to extract money out of the plants that grow on your land, but the land itself, that soil, you have to be doing something with it for the benefit of everybody else, because it's capturing, or should be capturing, CO2, should be providing with certain biodiversity quality. So I think that beats, and it's not just the pragmatics, but it actually goes, you know, asking the question, what is it that you are actually owning and what is it that you are not owning? And it will happen with many things. Just that you basically don't own the airspace on top of your land. You cannot simply shoot a bird because it goes through your land. So the same thing, I mean, you could extend that thinking to what happens with your soil. And implicit in your proposals is that. And I think it would be nice to introduce it somehow, whether it is in a number of headings or in one drawing. And I think it's implicit in the fact that you're exporting the soil. At some point in time, there's a soil trade drawing that says by doing this and that, you're actually exporting soil, or by buying these products, you are importing soil that has been damaged elsewhere. So that is implicit, no? That somebody is, or a country is losing its soil, or is losing that asset somehow. And yeah, that would be my only comment in an otherwise quite good presentation.
Thank you, Ravi.
If I may I try to bring together the different comments from the total ignorant, which is me, but not quite, in the sense that, first of all, congratulations, because I've seen the beginning of this, and it's amazing what you've done. The clarity of the presentation, the ability to condense the wealth of information and to represent it graphically is extremely good. So thank you for that. But then there's the issue of maybe your audience is not me, is not the total ignorant. I would need your presentation in slow motion, step by step. I would need you to explain all the, the passages and all the decisions. But then maybe that's what could be in the remaining work, the work you could do in these remaining weeks, which Ed was suggesting, to clarify what is a given, what is in the method you're applying, what is already happening, and what it is that you are adding to that, which is just a way of maybe highlighting in what ways your work is original, contributing new ideas or forms of applications, and that could include also how it progressed from the first stage to now the emerge. So it's again still graphically to show that. But then, okay, that would be for, let's say, for me, your audience. But imagine taking this to a community hall to sell it to somebody who is not completely ignorant, as you mentioned, has generations and generations of knowledge of certain practices, which actually maybe you want to dismantle or take away from them, but they also have a deep knowledge of the land, of the precise environment where they are, and of the materials they work with. So they would be a more difficult audience. They would need other things emphasized. So maybe it could be almost a parallel reworking of some of your content, a sort of a summary, which could also become a divider, which you already have in the different stages of your proposal, to highlight, for me, oh, this is what you didn't get here, I give you the summary, or for the others, this is what you do. But if you instead do it that way, it may be better. And then there's a third phase, which is better for whom and for what. There were projects in the program in the past years which were working on a much larger scale, maybe, but had to consider almost a section of the planet and its atmosphere in terms of the consequences. And you have these chunky sections of your sites where the layers, the geological strata and the atmospheric ones are considered. But if you were to go out to the center of the Earth and to the outer layers of the atmosphere to show the effect at a global level, if I know that you can't project, if all the world were doing this, what would happen? You can't do that, but just a suggestion, because then again, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the local farmer, and I shouldn't because I have no clue. But it's like, yeah, okay, I'm good for the planet. I'm very happy. I'm getting incentives, and me, what? So there's this kind of, I think only graphically you can do it to bring together and almost short circuit the effect of a global level of this as a theory, and then maybe just the yield of the crop, which then translates into income, or maybe needs to be supplemented by incentives. So it's already all there, but it would collapse, let's say, the planet and the wallet of the single farmer into almost a synoptic view. And I'm just talking about this because I don't know about these things, so I can't say, oh, but that plant doesn't grow well there and you should have less or more. I'm not going to go there because I have no idea. But really, congratulations. And just a silly question. At some point you had pink which emerged, which I presume was the fertilizers in one of the many images you showed in the traditional agricultural systems.
Yeah.
And I found that very powerful because everything here is kind of good, is brown, blue, green, and then there's that moment where I presume it's intended to symbolize the chemical fertilizers. That works because it's as a visual gesture, so it's almost like an alert an alarm going off. So maybe more of these could gently, because I don't want to spoil. It's a fantastic graphic presentation, but yeah. But thank you. I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Done. And what next for you after these 2 weeks, besides the fact that I think Chris is going to hire you?
I hope so. I hope.
Working in the left.
Sounded like.
Yeah, I'll definitely contact him in the next 2 weeks. But now that I'm back in India, there's a lot happening with the same agricultural bill changing in India as well, and there's a lot of protest and a lot of things that have not been considered in the new agricultural bill in India as well. So I will try definitely to bring in some of the ideas and that I've learned in UK and how people have started talking about it and are working towards creating policies for it, but that's not really happening here at all. So definitely would like to start a discussion here in India as well relating to similar issues. Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking of doing next.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Okay. Thank you, Nandita. Thank you, I think, all of the Euros for such a good set of comments. I think it's been quite a useful session and quite a useful, I wouldn't say cohort because it's new, but congratulations on the work. And thanks everybody for coming. I don't know if there is any other questions or comments, whether it is from any of the Euros or our students. But as I don't see any hands raised, I think, yeah, you can draw this to a close. So thanks, Liam, for coming. Teresa, for your comments. Ed, for attending as well. Chris has already left because he had already a meeting. And absolutely thanks, Nandita, for the great amount of work and dedication you've had to the course and to the thesis. And without further ado, I think we can close this. To all of the LU students, we will meet again on Thursday for the introduction on the themes of this next term. And yeah, landscape urbanism keeps going on. And tomorrow as well, let me see, we have a diary tomorrow at 8:30. We do have Teresa, today is Tuesday, I'm looking at the diary, Rhetorics of Mapping at 8 in the morning.
Yeah, ouch.
Oh, good. It's an early bird.
I didn't choose it, but seems to work fine for the group. So I'll see you tomorrow at 8.
8 in the morning, my goodness. Okay. Thanks for everything. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, see you soon then.